feedback. We love hearing this.
Yeah. So getting sober has been so cool because my dad has healed so much watching me take on a spiritual life. And I think living it out the way that I am, like, in a way, his pain taught me so much and what I wanted to bring into my home. So yeah, just that spiritual program, I think, was one of the main things like I was missing growing up. I think I made people's opinions of me God, because no matter what, you replace God with something. Sure. And so,
well, and in high school, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
That's a tough time. So
yeah. And I think too, like, for me, getting sober and like also now understanding like autism runs in our family, looking back through my life when I look at what I've been through, in elementary school, socially things were really hard for me. Like, I didn't understand social situations very well, and my friends will still make fun of me. Like, we joke about it. I sat alone under a tree from like first to fourth grade, but excelled and like highly preferred subjects, or like I would do drama and I could memorize like a whole script overnight, and I loved to be on stage. And so getting sober, like when we chose a church, we started going to church, one day we came home and I told my husband, am I supposed to say hi to people if I know them, or do I wait for them to say hi to me? And he was like, oh my God, Kelsie. And I was like,
That's funny.
But I'm sober, like I'm finally feeling all of my emotions. And so, and social situations. And so I really was able to kind of go back and realize, like, wow, I think drinking provided that bridge for me to be social in ways that I was just unaware that were hard for me.
Sure.
And then the drugs, and we were kind of talking about this, like, I got a therapist in 2021. Her name's Karen Wood. She's amazing. She knows the brain, and she's spiritual. So it was like all my worlds colliding. And
I'm familiar with Karen.
Yeah, and so Karen was like, you only, use stimulants? And I was like, yeah. She goes, well, you definitely have ADHD. Like, there's no doubt you're all over the place. And she, kind of presented to me like, I really think if you had treated this at a young age, you wouldn't maybe have struggled so much. Because I told her, like, the stimulant solved a problem for me. I had a problem. I found the solution. And so that's where, like, the craving and the addiction came in. It was self-medicating what I was already struggling with.
Naturally go to self-medicate
Isn't
without
it crazy?
knowing or being educated beforehand.
Yeah, like, you're just introduced to it for whatever reason, and then you're like, oh, wow, like, this is the answer. Like, I'm getting up.
Really
I'm really good at cheer now. Like,
until
I can focus.
It doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
When you were going through that in school, I mean, you said you kind of were like, hey, I think I need help. Like, what was the journey there? Like, when did you feel like you were able to get on your feet and, like...
It was a long, brutal process.
Sure.
So the original... I knew, okay, so I was using, and I have this vivid memory of being in Buchanan's parking lot, and, like, I was looking through the bottom of my car for, like, crumbs of cocaine, and I was like, what am I doing? Like,
carpet surfing.
Yeah, like, here's this, I went from, like...
We all know carpet surfing.
It's true.
That's a big one.
And you go from, like, being this athlete, like, I'm in Algebra 2 my sophomore year, I'm taking all these classes, I'm on this track to go to college, and all of a sudden, like, I can't get up in the morning and get dressed. All I can think about is, how am I going to get more of that stuff? How am I going to get more? And I had a teacher, my Spanish teacher, her name was Mrs. Parra. She her girly girl, and she was like, what is wrong with you? You used to come dressed to the nine every day, and now you're in pajamas and, like, your hair's greasy. Like, what's going on with you? And she called me out. She wouldn't let it go. And I was ditching, it was just crazy. So she went to my cheer coaches at Buchanan, and she was like, actually, Jamie Campbell, she's the business director at my time. She was my athletic director at that time, or activities. She did something. And she was like, they called me out, and I got mad. I started going at it with them, and I was
about
like,
Jamie Brown?
Yeah. And
she's great.
Yeah, I love her. And it's just crazy how it got, like, all of us now are together, but they called me out, and so that night I went home and I told my mom, like, I'm addicted to cocaine. Like, I can't stop thinking about it. I was having that craving, not knowing like how to put words to it. And so then, I went to treatment in LA, and I came home and it got worse,
Like how soon?
Like I just remember, so I go to AA there, they introduced me to AA. And I remember when they were like, you have this, because I went thinking like, oh, they're going to fix me, like there's something wrong, they're going to fix me. And it was like, no, you have this disease and like you can never drink or use drugs or go have fun, basically is what I heard. You can't have fun ever again. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to make it. Like I'm going to die before I ever see 30, because at 16, I'm already struggling this bad. How am I supposed, I'm not even 21 yet and I'm an alcoholic, in my mind, I was able to like really look at it and go, this isn't possible. But I tried. Like I came home, I went to AA, I would get 3 months sober and I'd relapse. And I think my parents were like, because addiction was such a new concept, like this isn't working, none of the treatment's working. So I would relapse, I'd run away. Like my parents would drop me off at the AA meeting, and there was a door on the street, and I would call whoever and be like, hey, meet me there at this time, I'm coming. And I would get in the car and I'd be gone for weeks using drugs and, stealing, just doing whatever I can to get the money. And so my parents started the tough love route and put me in juvenile hall. And then I ended up doing 6 months and graduating from high school in juvenile hall in 2008. So like a month before I'm supposed to graduate high school, I failed a drug test and they put me in juvenile hall for 6 months till I was 18 and a half.
So there was no treatment on the table. It was you going to juvenile hall.
Yeah, that was my treatment.
Wow.
Yeah, like it had gotten to where it was just like, it just very, very tough. Like,
So
get it together.
high school was a rough time.
Yeah, it was, it went from like, it was just really dark. Like so much, then you go to juvenile hall and you can't get out and hang out with anyone from your community, really. Like, people are like, what, this girl is really bad, and that was the other thing, going to rehab and coming back, like, integrating into a healthy community was like, I'm now the rehab, like, cocaine addict kid, like, that's my identity, and that was so embedded into my identity that even into adulthood, it was hard for me to, like, separate. Because I started so young, so it built me. Juvenile hall, and then I got pregnant when I was 19, and that, like, nobody wanted me to have my son, but I was like, no, I know that this is from God. Like, my dream was always to be a mom. Obviously, the circumstances were really bad, but I just said, no, like, I can do this. And I got sober. I stayed sober, and then at 21, I was like, well, what teenager gets sober? I'm going to drink. Like, I'm sure I can handle it and I can control it. And so I actually went with my parents. We went to Sequoia Brewing, and we all drank, like, unhealthy drinking in my family, all of my life, unhealthy boundaries. Yeah, and so from 21 to 27, I struggled on and off, like, my husband worked at the Mad Duck. So my husband isn't my first son's. He's his stepdad.
Got it.
So we went to a barbecue. We started hanging out. And then he worked at the Mad Duck. He cooked there for 7 years. So I would...
Your husband?
Yeah. So I would sit and drink until he got off work.
Yeah.
It was like just
People watch
young
drink
20s.
At the Mad Duck.
Yeah. And they were so good to us. They walked us through so much stuff. But, just that craziness of, like, I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm drinking till I throw up, I got a phlebotomy license and started working at Valley Children's. I did that for 6 years. Like, from the outside, I was holding it together pretty well. But then a pretty big trauma had hit my son with his biological father. And it was so severe that it just crushed me. Like, I was 24. I was probably barely hanging on, but in my mind, I felt like I was doing good because I was paying my bills and I'm taking care of my kids. My marriage is good. But once that hit, like, that little thread that I was hanging on to, I couldn't hang on anymore. And we went through, like, a criminal court situation, and it was like, the darkest, 3 years of my life. Like, I'm a mother of 2. My second son has autism. I don't know yet. He's nonverbal.
How old is he?
He was, at that time, this happened 6 months after, when he was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
So then I'm fighting postpartum depression, not knowing, because I didn't know what that was.
That's a lot.
And I'm only 24, and I just at 27, after the case had finished, for like 6 months, I went into full blown addiction. Like, I was using cocaine, I was using meth. I just was in the darkest depression. It wasn't like a party. It was like I'm alone in my car crying, looking through my phone.
You're married at this point? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that with your husband?
So I think my husband knew me before I was an addict, and we were friends all throughout high school. So it wasn't a secret to him the way that I was. He was the first person who showed me grace and love and tolerance. Of course, he was upset. Like,
Sure.
he was really mad. He's not an addict. He doesn't use drugs. He drinks normally. Like, he's just got the most normal brain ever, and it's weird. I'm like, you have the weirdest brain. It's so normal.
I don't know. I think I could beat you on that one.
And he just fought for me. He knew my story. Like, he knew what I had been through, and I think that he was just like, you need somebody to help you. And he was advocating for me. And then towards the end, he was like, okay, I'm going to take the kids. Like, this is getting out of control. Like, we have to get you into treatment. So we were trying to figure out how to get me into treatment. I can't even barely get ready in the morning.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure it out. I have Medi-Cal. He's in nursing school. So we're in the system trying to get through his schooling. And one night I cracked, and I attempted suicide. I jumped from a building, and that was what led to like long-term recovery for me, was the hospital stay. They jumped all over me because the psychiatrist or the psychologist, whoever comes and sees you, they medicated me and they questioned me, right? Because they wanted to know what was going on.
So you were 5150.
I was 5150.
Right,
I had broken 2 bones in my legs, and I had a brain bleed. Yeah. So I was in trauma, and when I came to and came out of everything, the doctor came and saw me, and she goes, when I medicated you and questioned you, all you said over and over was, I don't know how my life got like this. Please help me. It's like so sad,
Yeah.
She said I was just completely broken.
There's nothing worse than being in that hospital bed, like remembering everything up to that point, but at the same time, it's like this dark just spiral that you're in, and you sit there and you're like, who's gonna help me, right? I've been there. I know that feeling. I hear what you're saying, and it is the most alone feeling, and the hospital has that other feeling, and you get lucky if a nurse or someone is there and cares about you. But knowing that you're basically a prisoner at that hospital, but at the same time, you're not sure what's going to happen in front of you. It's definitely one of the most lonely times. I feel what you're saying right now.
I mean, sounds like we're going on 10 years. I mean, in essence, from what I'm hearing in this
almost,
story.
yeah. 6,
like mid-teens to like mid-late 20s. In terms of your battles.
Yes,
and wow. I mean, yeah, it's a lot. So, where did it go from there?
So I actually had amazing nurses. Like, they all started sharing their stories with me, and they just, like I said, I was so willing. They jumped all over me. This lady, so I had to do like a speech eval, a swallow eval, all this stuff. And so the speech, the lead acute care speech and language pathologist came in. Her name's Brenna Hughes. And she starts questioning me, and I'm on a 5150, so I have a sitter, my husband, and me. And she starts asking me all these questions about brain injuries. Like, have you ever hit your head? Have you ever had a concussion? And I'm like, because I had a brain injury, but she was asking like in my past, and I'm like, what does this like have to do with anything? But I'm answering, and I'm like, I think so. And she goes, do you know the definition of a brain injury? And I'm like, yeah, you hit your head and you pass out, because that's how we were taught, right?
Right,
Like
that's what I
we
would
never
guess,
heard
right?
the word concussion. And she said, no, actually, it's any blow to the head or body that causes any one of these symptoms to happen. She hands me a symptom list, and it's like blurred vision, headache, like nausea. And
Yeah.
I literally laugh, and I'm like, well, under this definition, I've had, I can't even count. I'm an athlete, like, and I tell her I'm a gymnast, and I've been kicked in the head. I was a base. I go through all this stuff, and she's like, well, we have at this hospital like a passion for concussions and brain injuries because we're level 1 trauma, and that's our specialty. She goes, we're finding that with the science, people who have had multiple brain injuries exhibit high risk behavior. And she goes, I think you have a lot of brain injuries, including the one you have now, and I think it's been a contributing factor to some of your reckless behavior on top of the trauma. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? So they went like a trauma, brain injury, psych route instead of just psych.
Yep.
And I went through all this therapy that was related to brain injuries, and I left the hospital, and the hospital's like, we want you to start speaking with us and sharing your story. And from there, I just took off. Like, I entered into recovery. I went a Christ-centered route through recovery because I had done AA and I already had chosen my higher power. And I was like, I need to dig deeper. Like, if I choose Christ as my higher power, I need to figure out what Christ says about me. And so Jenna McGill was like, I do this regeneration class at the Well. You should come. And I literally live behind the old Well campus.
Okay.
So I was like, well,
How about that new Well campus?
I know, so nice.
That's really nice.
cool.
Yeah. So I just would walk over every Monday, and I just went on this journey, this spiritual journey of figuring out who Jesus is, because I had literally no idea. And now, at our church, like, we just found out that I lead in youth there, and we launched a youth regen class a year ago. I oversee it, regeneration. We found out we're the first youth group in the nation where a youth regeneration class has created a need for an adult one.
Oh,
So the adults in our church are asking for adult regen because of the change that the youth is experiencing.
wow.
So God has just totally
So that's full circle.
taken it all. Yeah, like, I'm sitting across from me, kids that I grew up around from my community, and I'm using all of the pain and the trauma to help them, like, walk them through to hopefully a better outcome.
That's good.
So yeah, it's a lot of plot twists.
That is a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of details missing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If I try to tell a story and then I look back, I'm like, I told like 5% of what actually.
Yeah.
And that was intense as it is. What I hear, it's the basic approach to addiction when everyone's talking. There's that, we were talking about this, there's that
Right.
puzzle, and it starts to kind of break apart when you're 14, right? All of a sudden you find yourself at high school, going through your car, looking for stuff, not dressing the way that you used to. And by the way, teachers that do what she did, those are the teachers.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you talk about for like 30, 40, 50 years. You joke about them, you laugh about them. You hope that your kids have them again. Those are not just teachers. Those are mentors. Those are people that like genuinely change your life. I have multiple of those that were just, I'll never forget them. So this puzzle falls apart, and you went through all of this stuff. When the puzzle pieces are coming back together, and correct me if I'm wrong, but after this last traumatic event, the hold, the nurses come in, they care for you, and then you go that different route that involves, brain injury. Would you say it's correct if I were to say that no matter what path you took, that's provided a purpose for you, or a path,
Yes.
and that there was probably zero to little effort when you were walking or going down that path?
100%. Like we were talking about, one of my big things that I took out of it was that your pain has a purpose, and your purpose is found where your pain is. And I look back and I had no purpose. I had no idea, like, why am I here? Why am I doing all this? What's the point? I knew from a young age I wanted to be a mom, and that was it. But even in being a mom, like, what's the purpose of that? Like, what am I giving to my kids? What am I teaching them? And so I think for me, it started out as a purpose of, like, I'm going to educate the community on brain injuries, but then turned into, like, a very deeply spiritual purpose where I want to give hope to other people that there's a way out, and that there's healing, and that there's, this is where you go.
Well, and we need more of what you're doing. We do it in our way. You're doing it in your way. You've got through your church. You've got this class that you help teach, which is great, and it has that community. It's shared experiences. This is why we got into what we do here at Forward. So I don't know if Sean told you this. We do ABA therapy.
Yeah, he did.
So we work with a lot of families with ADHD and also autism situations where we're working with kiddos. So I mean, I'm sitting here and people listening to you and your story, what they may not understand, being a parent of a kid with autism is hard.
Very.
I'm trying to picture you going through what you're going through personally with your own personal struggles, and then you've got, you said 2 kids?
2.
On the spectrum? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
We have trained professionals here where we work with families just trying to get to school and trying to survive while also, helping their kids. And that is already heavy. Yeah. So, if you throw in some, other trauma there and some other experiences, that's a lot of layers. I empathize with that.
Your husband must be a rock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
he's a veteran. He's a Marine. So we joke that all of our crap, God used it to prepare us to be what we need for our kids. Because it's true. Like, sometimes it feels like
100%.
we live in a psych ward. Like, that's the truth. Like, there's screaming, there's yelling, it's chaos. Like, sometimes if I close my eyes, I'm like, I feel like I'm in juvenile hall right now. Like, but at the same time, like, the mental grit, I think that foundation from me being an athlete, him being a Marine, and me going to jail too, like juvenile hall, sitting in a cell alone at 18 with only a pencil. Most of the day you're in your cell because they didn't care about us and they left us in there. Like, I have this strength and inner grit that is just unique. It was birthed out of torture.
Well, and the challenge is, I would agree. Just listening to your story, and Sean and I have shared some of our experiences, and I don't feel like it's getting easier, especially since COVID.
Yeah.
I think, not just because of COVID. I just think the way times are going and culmination of lots of things, I just think that it's harder than ever to live, to work, to raise a family, to have balance, to find fulfillment. I just think it's really hard, the hardest it's ever been. And so what I think is valuable and important that you've touched on is we believe strongly. She actually said digging in deep. Did you hear her earlier?
and grit.
I love that. We're very big on mental grit also, but it's not like you can't just teach those things. But those things are so important because we're losing the ones jumping out of their own proverbial or maybe even literal buildings like you did, who don't have it, who need it, and we can't get it to them fast enough.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we need, the challenge is creating more opportunities, whether it's a regen class, whether it's services like we provide. And honestly, I think the most helpful thing is dialogues like this.
Yeah.
The generation before our generation is very much like, buck up.
Yeah.
Toughen up. I didn't go to that. You don't need to go to that.
Girth your loins.
I figured it out.
Totally.
You should figure it out.
Girth
And
your
I
know that one.
I'm big on, I appreciate what you're doing, which is just like sharing your experience. And it's not easy to do. It takes, I can tell you've probably done it a few times. It takes a level of it takes a level of comfort and vulnerability. But the problem is if we clam up and we keep to ourselves about these sorts of things, and obviously there's some personal experiences that maybe you keep to yourself, obviously, but here's the trade-off. We can all pretend like everything's okay and compare ourselves to each other and say, man, they must really have it together, and that only makes me feel worse if I feel that about everyone around me. Or when people like you open up about your experience, or I have a setting like this regen class, or maybe like certain services like we provide at Forward, where I can go in and I can hear other people's stories, and I can hear what they're going through, and not only what they're going through, but how they overcame it, or how they navigated that, how they came out a stronger person, how their pain became their power, like what you touched on. I feel like one of the best ways people's pain can become their power is by hearing other people's journey.
I totally agree.
And we don't do it enough.
I totally agree.
We don't do it enough because, and it's getting better. I do think that it's becoming less taboo, and that's good. But there needs to be more forums like this, more opportunities for discussion. And there needs to be more, and I think there is the best it's been, but still a long ways to go, acceptance. You talked about being that kid, labeled that person. And if I had $1 for every story, whether it's here at Forward or through church or somewhere where that, because, their struggles were known, or, they were the one with addiction problems or this or that. And then, religious or not, I feel like, especially in our time growing up, there was less grace for that. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. But, there needs to be more consideration, I think, for what people are going through, and allowing people to press the reset button. And which it sounds like, you've got a decent community around you that's, helped you to be able to do that, which is nice. You don't always find that.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard on people and frankly make their situation even worse or more difficult.
No, it's true. I probably wouldn't even be going to church if I hadn't have found like the church that I'm at, just because they are really big about open acceptance. Like, we don't care where you've been, we care where you're going. That is like the heart of everything we do. And like it's true, religious or not, like we need these attitudes and ideas and emotional responses to everyone. It needs to spread like wildfire. Like, I'll go in any community, whoever will have me, who can I talk to share. And I would say the most powerful thing that we do in Regen is we sit in a circle, we have your own group, and you share and you talk about it, and the curtain comes down, and they're learning from this person's experience, even though it's 100% different, and you have the church kid who's like never cussed, and then you have like the kid over here who's doing drugs, but they're all together and they're learning that they're all the same. And I think that is like, I get chills because for me, going to juvenile hall, that's what I learned fundamentally, was like, we can come from any neighborhood, any place, but our pain, it's what unites us all. We all feel pain, but the circumstances are always different. And with the equal amount of or enough support, we can all launch, right? And go out and do what we need to do and find our place.
Well, and that's, honestly,
that was pretty well said.
You're perfect to be here, because that's the point of the Dig podcast. At Sean and I at first, it's kind of like, do we do this? Don't we do this? And it's not like we've got millions of people here tuning in, but more and more each week, we get a text here and there.
Local impact is so much more powerful.
But we, you know what? I'll get a text, someone I haven't talked to in like 10 years.
Yep.
Hey, I listened to your podcast, and I just want to say, like, that story, I really related to that, resonated. I'm like, whoa, I haven't talked to you in 10 years.
Yep.
I'm like, what's going on with you?
And
then they'll talk to me, and I'm just like, oh, dang.
I do it for the direct messages.
Yeah.
It's so rewarding.
And you know what? That's been like,
thing.
I don't know, just a couple each week. It's not like we're out, I don't know, conquering the world with this thing, but I don't really care. I just appreciate, and I really enjoy, taking an hour like we do weekly to have this opportunity to, even if it's a couple people, even if it's one, that's, it's worth it. And it takes stories like these, and it takes people willing to share it, and it benefits a lot more than I think people realize. And so what I was going to say, in addition to what you and Sean touched on, is that people need to have the courage to share their stories.
Yeah.
And they need to know that for every person that will judge you or think less of you, yes, they exist, and yes, they're out there, and you're never going to change them. So to heck with them, and whatever.
Those aren't your people.
Who cares?
Haters
gonna
on the circle.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
But for every one of those, like, there is someone out there who needs to hear you, who needs to know what you know, and who needs to feel what you feel. I believe that very strongly, and I believe that God puts us in those people's paths purposefully and intentionally to make those connections. And it's more than ever in my life. You talked about your higher power. We're Christian based also, but there's some differences. But I don't even care anymore much about the doctrinal differences. Like, to me, what matters more than anything at this juncture is the storytelling and the empathy. Yeah. And just being there for people.
Just finding something.
That is as I think Christ-like as it gets, really. Yeah. And that is what helps people to dig in and to have the mental fortitude. It takes that kind of vulnerability and that kind of storytelling. And so, I mean, wow, like, what a story. And so now you do the regen classes, and then, like, how often is that? Like,
so Regen is our youth is it launches February 26th to May 13th. It's only 13 weeks. And then our first one is set to launch in January. We do it at the end of the year intentionally, like right before they graduate, to just get them strong.
Right before the
summer.
They
have mentors, like people to call before crazy summer. And then I do have a brand. It's called The Butterfly Inside. It was inspired by the acronym TBI, traumatic brain injury. But it's a mental health platform, and I have a website, it's thebutterflyinside.com. Okay. But that's just where, like, when we do stuff like this, I put it there. It's a resource list. It's a hub.
Good for you.
It's a trademarked thing. I am not going anywhere else with it just because my autistic boys are, like, my number one priority right now. But I do think it's a really important thing to have, because to piggyback off what you said, like, community collaboration, regardless of what you believe in, your circumstances, whatever, all of us coming together like this, it comes down to this. Like, with the way the world is going, all that's going to be left is what we're doing here in this place. And what I know to be true about Fresno is that it's big enough, there's enough places for multiple impact stories, right, and approaches, but it's small enough that, like, how many people do we, like, all know? It's insane.
Yeah, everyone.
It's small enough that it actually, like, these
Very
moments,
impactful.
they are like wildfire here, and people will talk, and they will go, and they will reach out. And so for me, like, the gift of sharing my story and coming out with it has been how many people I've actually met that do care. Because when you're in the darkness, you're only around people that you think don't care, right? It's dark, so you're in the darkness.
Yep.
Like, when you go out into the light and start sharing,
everyone else experiences.
Well,
Yes.
the biggest,
and there's help, right?
I feel that the biggest amplifier of challenges people face. It can be addiction. It can be, anything. Honestly, is when you're made to feel like you're alone in your struggle.
Loneliness.
If you're basically closed in, if you take your condition or your situation and you put some walls around it, or you're made to feel like there's walls around it, then that just compounds the situation. So I think you just hit on the head. Is that, again, it goes back to kind of what we were saying earlier, is whatever you can do to break those walls down, so that others know they're not alone in their struggle, and part of it too is just, like, it's normal to struggle,
right?
Like, it's actually, like, that's living.
Yeah.
Like, it's like my biggest problem growing up. So I wasn't like an addict or anything like that. My problem was that I was too focused. I think you said a little bit too on perfection.
Yeah.
And, like, what people thought. That's its own
beast
problem sometimes. And so like any time I was out of line, it's just like, oh, crap. Like, can't do that. Like, but then like I realized, gosh, that's so unhealthy. Like it took a long time actually.
Yeah.
And, but again, it comes from, but when I finally was able to be more comfortable with that and get over that, it was by people that actually, took time to listen and talk to me and that I could like relate to more.
Right.
And I realized like, oh, like I'm too rigid and I'm focused more on like being perfect all the time and not giving myself grace for like when I screw up.
Right.
And so I feel like, I guess what I'm saying is part of building the grit and being able to dig in is like being allowed to have the realization that what I'm going through is mortal and normal, and I'm allowed to go through this. Like this doesn't make me less than just because I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing. Right. I get that a lot just listening, to what you're talking about. And it sounds like you've got a husband that's very dialed into that, and kudos to him. So
good man.
So you run the classes, which is really awesome. The regen classes. You'd mentioned, so you still go to the well?
No, I go to Clovis Hills.
Oh, you go to Clovis Hills.
Yeah,
okay,
I did
cool.
regen at the well, and then I found Clovis Hills
Okay.
with Jenna.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then you're a high fit instructor?
I'm not an instructor.
Or
participant.
Participant. Okay.
Very
sorry.
loyal participant.
Sorry, big and high fit.
Like every participant.
So you're big in church. You go to high fit. I know high fit's a big community.
Oh,
It's huge.
You got a lot of friends.
Yep.
New community doing that. That's awesome. What else are you involved with? I mean, you got kiddos with autism. So that's its own community. I know that.
Yes, and then I volunteer like at Clovis Unified for their parent like autism community thing, and then the Butterfly Inside. So I do speaking. Like I've spoke at the high schools with Lisa Smith Camp and Fresno PD. I've been in a couple like local documentaries for addiction. But really, other than that, it's all just like frontline work, like mentoring women. I mentor all walks of life, not just addicts, through in regen or different programs. I had a mom reach out to me who was actually Kane's aide in a special ed class. Her daughter was in a mental health crisis, and I mentored her through Ascend Behavioral Health.
Yeah.
So it's all service work for me. But yeah, I just come alongside whoever needs it. And
that's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, walk them through. So.
And it's all that more fulfilling for you, on your own journey still to give back like that. And that's awesome.
I think a lot of mental health programs should bring on mentors like that, because what I've found is sometimes, like for the young girl that I mentored, she would have suicidal thoughts outside of Ascend time and come over and we'd talk. And sometimes it was just like big emotions, right? That are associated with whatever mental health struggle she had. And I really think the mentor aspect alongside the mental health treatment and medication is like a heavy hitter, because it normalizes what they're going through. Like what we're saying, it equalizes it, and it helps them be more open in treatment. Like, why did my therapist say this to me? What does this mean? Because you're trying to sort it out.
And that is the key, because, and we've talked about this on this podcast before. If people aren't made to be able to feel comfortable to share and hear genuine feedback and genuine stories, then the feedback is watered down or partial or not genuine.
It's not beneficial.
And they're not able to, if the truths aren't being told, the hard truths, then the hard progress isn't being made. And so, 1,000 times we agree, 1,000 times over with what you're saying. And I guess in closing, what I appreciate, again, just about this story is, mental health, we talked about this a little bit on a couple podcasts ago. What probably frustrated me most about COVID is that mental health is such a bigger pandemic.
Right.
That's the real pandemic,
right.
the true one. Everyone is going through something, and many of us actually have legitimate mental health struggles, and many just don't know it or know what that means. And many of those people feel like, if I'm seeking help, then something's wrong
I'm
with me,
weak.
or I'm weak, or whatever. When, it's just not the case.
It's a sign of
And
strength to ask for help.
It is, and it's also a sign of strength to be comfortable, with that, and to grow comfortable with it. And that's not easy.
And it's hard to ask for help. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Your attitude is the precursor, right, to like the way you approach and perceive things. And then when you learn to do that, you kind of figure out that having that attitude that you naturally want, that makes you feel good, that you're not forced to do, that evolves into you doing what you're doing. The vibe you bring into this chat, right? The way you reach out to people, it literally changes everything. Your attitude has pretty much changed everything about you, and it's put those puzzle pieces together.
I mean,
it's great.
I mean, you're the full package. I mean, you come in here with
agree.
I mean, you're not, you're not excusing yourself. I can hear the accountability in your story and in your voice. It's not like some people,
Absolutely.
Some people can use mental health or certain things as a crutch. I don't get that at all, in your story. And
yes, I had to make lots of amends.
I think that's important. I think that's important. I mean, I heard it, like you said, that one teacher, like, even though she like totally called you out hard, and you're like, but I love her,
She was at juvenile hall as a teacher when I was in there.
But see,
so
cool. A lot of people don't have the maturity or the wherewithal to say. Instead, they flip it and say, this person's the villain, or they're in my way, or they're the problem. But already I can see the maturity there, where you're like, no, I love this lady. She helped me, and she was there for me. And there's so much to unpack. But I appreciate you being on today,
Thank
Kelsie,
you guys
and
for having me.
sharing your story.
So Kelsie, the butterfly inside.
Yep.
Is it tbi.com or the butterflyinside.com? How would people, if they want to go and read some stuff?
It's the butterflyinside.com. And then my Instagram is Kelsie, which is my Filipino last name short. So that, they can reach out to me there, or Facebook, my name.
Great.
Very cool. Well, I'm sure we will see more of each other down the road.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
We'll chat plenty.
And thanks for coming on and being willing to
Kelsie.
share your
Thank
story
you
today.
guys.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.